Hey everyone, and welcome back to the weekly Unreal Engine Twitch live stream. I'm your host, Community Manager Chance Ivy, and I'm here today with Nick Donaldson.
Hi.
And Nick Whiting, who is coming in via Skype. He will be taking the place on the couch there. You'll see his head show up at some point in the near future. Today we're going to be talking over... Oh, there he is! Yeah, and he's in. Hey Nick, what's going on? It's doing pretty good. Can you throw us some audio real quick just to make sure we're good? Check, check.
Test, check.
I can hear you. We good, Shelly? Yep. Woo! Awesome. So we're going to be going over VR, well, just about everything VR, kind of the state of it currently in Unreal Engine, and some, forward-facing things, and there's quite a bit of great Q&A that's rolled in over the last week or so, or last few days since we just got this up. So if you got a question for the guys, Nick is actually the guy to answer it. Not this Nick, but that Nick. This Nick's pretty good too, but he's just all right. So anyway, with that, we're going to hop into the news. Before we cut over to the monitor, I just want to announce, we don't have the blog up on it yet, but it'll be coming after the stream. I'm actually writing it. We just announced 6 new Unreal Dev Grant winners earlier today. So real quick, I'll go over them. We've got Loading Human by Untold Games for $16,000. Blue Eye by Aaron Shea for $7,000. Bears Can't Drift from Ludophobia for $14,000. Super Ball, which is a first-person shooter soccer crossover game that was built by, I think the game was called Death Ball and UT.
Oh wow, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so it's those guys who have rebuilt the game in UE4, and it's
awesome.
So those guys are out of Germany. They're getting $8,000. Red Goddess from Yanim Studio is getting $14,000, and Zing the Land Beyond from White Lotus is receiving $12,000 grants. So congratulations to all those.
Cool.
If you're working on something really great and you haven't submitted, head to the Unreal Dev Grants page and send us the cool stuff you're working on. We still got a lot to dig through, but there's really incredible stuff in there, and I know that there's a lot of things I haven't seen, or I've seen in the wild that I haven't seen come across yet for grants, and I'm going to start poking people. It's like, hey, you should probably let us know about that. So anyway, so that's what we got on grants. Shelly, if we could, to the monitor. Awesome. So Marketplace content release this week. It came a little bit later as we had to take our Marketplace down yesterday for some routine maintenance, but John has got this up, and these items are now available for you to purchase today. So I'm going to roll on down here. In the Blueprints category, there's Ropes, Cables, and Hoses by Pure Polygons, because everybody needs all 3 of those things.
All the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a Pie Menu by The Dev, the one and only Dev. Vehicle Pack Volume 1 by Polypixel. That's awesome. There's going to be multiple volumes of vehicles, which I'm really excited about. Asteroids by Gargor. And Real Rocks Volume 2 by Moto Proprio. So there's different props you can use. Rocks both in space and more terrestrial rocks. Materials and Textures. 20 AAA PBR natural mats by Real Surfaces.
Ooh.
That sounds neat. That looks fuzzy. I want to touch that. Animated blood spray decals for MS Steel. You can put those up here on your asteroids for some space death. Music and sound effects. That looks like a dragon. Medieval fantasy audio bundle by Evil Mind. I was talking to John and a couple other people about imagery for sounds. It's always the best, because it's like it's got to communicate music, visually, and some of them like a flaming guitar and different things on there. It's always a lot of fun. So. All right, so 2D, we've got 2D sci-fi shooter by Quadra, so definitely check that out. That one's pretty cool. Big fan of that. Anyway, you can get those in your launcher right now. All right, on to some engine news. We've got the it's an engine features preview you can pull down from the build right now. There's a lot of new things that are coming. This went up a few days back, but I'd go over all the details here. There's a lot of little tiny minutial, updates to it there. So if you're interested in pulling down and seeing what's the latest of the late, you can actually get into GitHub and be one of those pioneers that is a man or woman of a bigger heart than myself, because I will take the binary every day. And let's see what we got here. Oh yeah, so quick news on Storm United. It's actually moving into early access. So Storm United is a game that we've had on the stream in the past. It's a multiplayer shooter game, and it's been Steam greenlit. They actually were one of our first grants recipients,
awesome.
And they're taking their game to early access. You can pick it up now. And I think I have a quick video. I think it's this first one that shows some of the gameplay here. Yeah, this is their greenlight trailer. I just wanted to touch on this really cool first-person shooter multiplayer. I'm going to skip ahead just a tad bit, but I want to play this. So you may remember last summer there was a team that was using the animation sequence content example and putting their models on them to try to figure out the art pipeline for UE4. This is that team. This game's come a long way in the last 6 months or so, and it's
yeah, it looks like it.
yeah, it looks awesome. So I'm probably gonna pick it up and play this weekend if I can get some time. Anyway, so really cool stuff. Definitely check that out.
It's great.
Mouse. All right, Storm United. What else do I have up here? Oh yeah. So after that, let's move into see if I can. I know I'm all over the place. Community Spotlight. So first one here is a game called Sticks. It's actually not even a game. It is a short story about a space explorer and his robot companion searching for paradise on an unknown planet. So it's built by just three people on the team. They called out Jeremy Ernst as a special thanks for some of the animation work. But I'm trying to make this full screen. I'm not really good. I can't computer today. There we go. Awesome. So yeah, it's an acronym for Signal Tracking Indicator Companion System. I'm always a big fan of people making non-game stuff in the engine. You know, it's kind of like the demo we had at GDC. Well, both of the demos we had at GDC that were more cinematic experiences rather than games themselves. Having said that, I'm really glad that games are being made. Anyway, so really cool cinematic there. It's inspired by Stick Salesman, who's on a sticksalesmanadventures.tumblr.com. So awesome work. I'm going to close that out now and on to the next thing. My organization skills are incredible if you haven't noticed. Everything's all over the place. Awesome. All right. So next one we got up is Everett Gunther's Secrets of Environmental Design blog that's on 80 level. So Everett Gunther is a SCAD student that we actually had in our educational spotlight on our blog here. I'll just hop over to that real quick. His stuff's been on the forums. You know, I'm sure a lot of you have already seen it. It's circulated around internally at Epic a number of times. But what's really cool about this blog is he goes into a lot of information about himself, his story, the things that he's working on, and his approach to design for environment art. And down here, it's like full asset breakdowns, the tools he uses, and a lot of his workflows. So this is something that I read over and I learned a lot. I'm a terrible artist, like bad, like really bad.
I believe it.
Yeah, I know you do. But I can do like, you know, the modeling part enough, but texturing gets really rough.
Yeah.
So I read over this. I was like, oh, cool. This gives me some things to actually think about, like, you know, using ZBrush instead of just Blender. and I'm probably going to dig into Substance a bit more too, because that's a really fun tool. But anyway, if you're interested in art at all, I'd definitely say go check it out. There's a lot of really good info in there. And then, cool, so that's all we got on these. And last community spotlight is a project out of Future Games. So let me see if I can find the 40-second mark. Oh gosh. I'm just going to get up to the gameplay. There's a bit of a lead up here. So, so yeah, Future Games, if you recall, we had like 7 or so, a really great montage they put out of like senior projects out of the school in Sweden. Horns actually teaches at the school. These are some of his students, and so he sends these over to us from time to time. And we found this one. We've had Suit on there. We've had a number of different projects from that. But this is built by in 4 weeks' time with about 6 people per group. So
4 weeks?
Yeah.
Damn.
And this video came out around March-ish, I think, maybe late February, and they started learning in September. So like around less than 6 months of actual training, and then a small team put this together in just 4 weeks.
That's crazy. The
project, the cinematics, the everything, right? Really cool. It's got like this Ratchet and Clanky Sonic Adventure kind of feel to it, which I'm a huge fan of third-person platformers. I can't even begin to tell you how much time I've spent playing both Ratchet and Clank and Sonic Adventure. So this was like, yep, I kind of love this. It kind of reminds me of Proto Man 2, which doesn't hurt. Anyway, so that's Adventure on Clover Island.
That's super
out of the
impressive.
Yeah. Students up at Future Games. I say up because we're down. If you're north of that, that's down for you. All right. So great work from everybody in the community. Yeah, really inspired by the work you do. Keep it up, and keep showing us stuff. If you're interested in getting on the community spotlight, we pull a lot of these things out of our normal channels like the forums. I pull them from Polycount, from Reddit. Just talk about your project. Hit us up on Twitter. Let us know what you're working on. It's always great to hear, and we're definitely here to help. So with that, we'll turn it over to the Nicks to talk about VR stuff. Hi, Nick Whiting.
Hey, Chance.
I'm gonna look at you on the couch this way instead of at the monitor, so it looks like you're actually in the room with us instead of halfway across the country, or the whole way across the country, I should say.
Yeah.
Technology brings everybody together, right?
It really does. So yeah, Nick and I were talking before this about breaking down some of what where VR is with Unreal 4. We haven't really talked about it much on the stream since. I mean, I know you had maybe done some stuff maybe around launch. Are we past that? No.
I don't even think so.
Don't even think so?
With Dana like a year ago.
Yeah, okay. Got it. Yeah, so it's probably high time that we kind of, give some love back to the VR space. And before, it's always been an issue getting Nick here because he likes gray weather and mountains and snow and sea.
I hate vitamin D.
Yeah, he does.
He's allergic to it.
He's a vampire, so. But now with the wonderful powers of this incredible new tool called the internet, we can pull him in and have him talk with us. So
technology.
Thanks, Al Gore.
Yeah. So Nick, if you want to just dive in, kind of tell us what you do at Epic, and we can start talking about VR.
Sweet. So yeah, I'm Nick. Basically, I lead up the Blueprints team and the VR team. So I kind of wear two different hats on any given day. But more recently, I've been doing a lot more on the VR side, just because there's so much to be done. I mean, if anybody went to GDC, you could see that the show was kind of like all about VR. It was, we had our booth there, and we were showing the demo that we did in conjunction with Weta Digital that was based on The Hobbit. We were showing the Showdown demo that we premiered at Oculus Connect last September. But right across the alley from us was the Oculus booth. They were showing our demos, and then right in front of us was the NVIDIA booth showing it, and then Sony was right in front of them showing the Morpheus stuff. So everybody was showing VR at GDC, and it was great to see, because this is the first time it feels like everybody's finally on board the train. Enough people have tried it and have become kind of true believers. So I don't know. It was very exciting for me. I don't know if you had any thoughts to add on that, other Nick.
No, yeah. I mean, we were both there together. We've been working on the same stuff for the last couple of years, and so it was pretty exciting to see pretty much all of that happening.
It's kind of like we were finally legitimized, right?
Right.
Oh yeah.
Really adopted as the true believers, and then now everybody has gotten a chance to see it. Because I think that's the problem with VR is, you can't show a trailer for VR because you don't have that sense of presence. You're not in the experience, so you really got to slap something on your face. And up to this point, the hardware's been a little bit rare, so it's a little harder for people to kind of experience that. But anyway, I thought I would start just by giving kind of a rundown of where we're at with all the different platforms that we're working on. So I guess we'll start off with Oculus, since we've had the kind of longest history with them. So at GDC, like I said, we were showing off the Thief in the Shadows demo, which was basically movie assets that we took from Weta Digital, and then did kind of down-res the mesh for the Smaug, the big dragon from the movie, and added vertex simulation based on their kind of supercomputer simulations, and got that all running at absurd resolutions and absurd frame rates live, so you kind of be in there.
We worked directly with Weta on that. We even had the same guy who modeled Smaug, like the original cinema asset. He even did all of the down-resing and everything. It was exactly the same people who made the cinema assets that actually did the work to get it running in real time as well, which was pretty cool.
Yeah. With that talk, there was a lot of really great challenges for you to have to overcome, right? With working with a movie quality asset, bringing it down into a game engine. Yeah. But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, so that was awesome. We also had the Showdown demo, just because everybody loves the kind of hot action that you get from going down in the middle of a war zone down an alleyway. So we had that one showing up.
Yeah, because that usually only happens to me here like on Saturdays, and now
hot action does.
No, the alleyway explosions and car flips. Yeah, and so now I can just do whenever I want. Just go up to Nick's desk and plug in. It's magic.
Hot action anytime you want. Thanks, VR.
Nice.
But yeah, the crux of that basically was the Weta demo that we did was kind of a nice test bed for us trying to up the fidelity of what we've been doing, because there's a lot of stuff in Showdown, but we didn't focus on kind of the high res believable assets that we did in the Weta demo. So spent a lot of time making sure that you can really feel like there's a giant dragon talking to you in the environment. So part of that was the pipeline. Then the other part was kind of getting us up to snuff with the latest and greatest Oculus hardware. So they had their latest Crescent Bay prototypes there, which are the new prototypes after the DK2 released. So we got that working. We were actually using the 050 integration back then at GDC, which is now kind of publicly released. So what we're doing right now with Oculus is we're integrating the 050 SDK into the 4.8 version that we're going to release in a little bit. So everybody can use that and get all the advantages that you get from having better tracking, more stable, and all the little kind of improvements that they did on their side. They'll roll out in 4.8 so everybody can use it.
Yeah. So and it's important to note on that it's not out yet, right? Like we ran into this. I was working with Nick on doing a demo internally not long ago where we pulled the 5.0 because it was the latest. It went. We didn't know that me and Carlos here, and we didn't know that 5.0 was out, and so we just grabbed the latest, and it was like, I just got
Wouldn't
released.
Run properly.
So we'll want to wait, right? Like developers want to wait until
Yeah, keep running the 4.4 runtimes with 4.7, and then when 4.8 comes out, you guys can all upgrade to 050 and see all the new hotness.
Or if you want to be one of those pioneers that dives into the source and starts fighting those dragons, then go nuts, right?
Yeah, exactly. But VR is a new thing, right? So there's hiccups along the way. You got to get all the different pieces together and proper. I mean, it takes us long enough to set up demo stations still. There's quirks to it. So
yeah, but still early technology.
Exactly, but it's fun technology.
It is. It's great.
Yeah.
Cool. So that about wraps it up for Oculus right now. The other big thing, we've been working with Valve very closely on getting support for Steam VR and the HTC Vive headset that they debuted at GDC.
Yeah, I didn't see it. I heard it's awesome.
It is. They were triple booked most of the time, so it was a very hard ticket to get. But if you got it, you see the future. It's awesome because
Did you get in on it?
I just still didn't get in it. I was we're expecting to get ours anytime now at the office. So.
Is he going to keep it out there with him?
No, we're getting it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it set up.
He's
Actually,
already got
it's pretty
one.
because we have a ladder set up with a box of frappuccinos on top of it with the lighthouse sensor on top of that. Actually, there's a ping pong paddle as well, and lots of blue masking tape.
Great.
Holding it up there because we didn't have a mounting bracket to put it up on the wall, so it looks very, but it's very high tech.
Awesome.
Sounds great.
But yeah, basically it's awesome because it's the first kind of widely available full room experience. So you can run around a large area in room size and do all sorts of cool things. So it really opens up a lot of possibilities. So we'll support that in 4.8 out of the box. It's already in mainline. So if you're one of those early adopters pulling out of GitHub, you can already get support for it if you already have a Vive. We've been working with lots of partners to kind of make sure that experience is super smooth and awesome and easy to develop for. So everybody should have an easy time as soon as 4.8 comes out. And we're actually going to be working on some documentation too about some of the differences between the kind of Oculus seated setup versus the Steam VR setup. We're going to have Sam Dieter, who just actually released an awesome Gear VR how-to doc about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, onto the web. Come out, play with the Vive with us, and kind of make some documentation on best practices and how to set up scenes and stuff like that. So hopefully by the time you guys get your hands on a Vive, you'll have a nice set of documentation to kind of guide you along.
Yeah, so with your setup currently, with all your ping pong paddles and duct tape, can we get a picture of that? We're getting requests in the chat for it, so I think it's kind of important that we don't have to have it. We don't have to have it now, but I'll put it up later.
JJ's working on it. JJ's actually sitting here next to me, so he's working on it.
Awesome. Yes. All right.
Yes. One last thing I would mention with that, the integration we have for 4.8 also supports the motion track controllers and whatnot. So you can basically, we treat them as a component in the world. So you can attach anything to that component and it'll just fly around and you can do cool things. You can have magic particle systems.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Actually, yeah, we got a preview on an iPhone of the setup. I don't know if there's a high enough resolution.
Yep, that's special. We are professionals around here. Yeah.
That's how it goes.
Yeah.
So yeah,
great.
that covers it for the HTC. It's kind of like the Oculus. If you have the plugin enabled and you turn it on and go full screen, you'll automatically be in VR land. But there's some differences with the the calibration point between Steam VR and Oculus, so you might have to make some modifications to your content. Steam assumes that the origin, the 0 point for the camera, is basically at the center of your room on the floor, where Oculus assumes it's kind of up at head height.
Got it.
And when you basically just rail your camera down to the floor for Steam, and then keep it wherever you want the head to be for Oculus. So minor stuff to be aware of.
Yeah, but a lot of that will be, I mean, the workflows of getting set up and moving are going to be similar to what people are already doing with other VR headsets, right? Like, it's not like a whole new workflow, a new process.
No, you just change the camera position, basically. So
that's awesome.
This is the floor. This is the normal height. So it's very easy. And like I said, Sam's coming out here, so he'll have an awesome doc with screenshots, just like his Gear VR Getting Started doc, which actually has animated GIF screenshots of how to use the editor, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Really rock that.
High tech.
Props to Sam.
Sam's the man. Cool.
All right, so we'll move on. We got the Gear VR, which is also a hot topic as of late, because that one just came out, and it's a lot of fun to play with. So we got support for that in 4.7. We had some hiccups, so we had to fix some things in hot fixes because they rolled up a new Android version and a new SDK version right as we were releasing. So we were kind of hitting a moving target as our build was locked down. But that's actually pretty stable now in the latest version of 4.7. So moving forward with that, they also just released the UE4 SDK, which we have support for in main now. JJ Hazing, who's the VR programmer that's been working on that, has put patches up in the forums on it. So we've got that, and we've got a couple other little fixes that we're putting in the forums for people that want them right now, because Oculus is doing a mobile game jam right now centered around the Gear VR. So we're kind of doing live support as people say, hey, we need this for our game. We're pushing out fixes as fast as we can.
I've heard there's an Epic employee that's a judge on that.
Yeah, there is some guy that doesn't know much about VR, but they let him on the channel anyway.
He's not. He's not on the West Coast either. He's not in the stream right now.
I would not be judging judging you as people and your games and your submissions. I'm very judgmental. That's why they asked me.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'll be judging that. So hey, I might have a particular inbuilt bias towards UE4, but but I would never let that get in the way of fair and equitable judging.
That's awesome.
So yeah, anyway, we got lots of fixes and updates. So the O50 stuff will be in 4.8 for those who want to use it then. But like I said, we're trying to keep people in the forums up to date as fast as we can roll out fixes. So yeah, other than that, kind of on the general, not device-specific front, for VR, what we're working on now is we're refactoring the camera a little bit. Because one of the things that's been the hardest is if you want to do anything other than kind of like a first-person moving around camera, you kind of have to get a pretty complicated setup, and it's not a lot of fun, and we recognize that. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep the vanilla, like it just works in a first-person scenario setup. So if you have a first-person game, you put on the Oculus, you go full screen, that'll just work for you still. But if you want to do something more complicated, what we're going to do is make a camera component, just like a normal camera component in the game that you use for any normal pawn or character setup. And then that will have its local offset set to the offset of the head-mounted display. So basically, you don't have to do anything. You'll just check a box saying, I want this camera component to be offset the same way my head is offset in the real world. So that'll make everything go through the same input path that you would in a normal vehicle game. You won't have to do anything special other than tick a box, and that camera will follow around automatically. So that we're hoping that will greatly help people kind of simplify the setup. If you're doing like a space shooter that's doing a bunch of crazy, rolling and maneuvering and stuff, that'll just all be automatic.
Yeah, that's
now.
great.
It also helps with.
You'll be able to attach your camera to whatever you want, and then move that thing, and then everything will just move relative to that thing.
Exactly.
It follows the normal hierarchy.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of people are trying to solve design problems around the first person camera,
right?
And that's like one camp, and then there's like other camp that's everybody else. That's
right.
just using stereoscopic 3D for anything in their game. There's a lot of where it's like you're just putting the monitor, or the same way as you look at a monitor, it's just in stereoscopic on your face with no head tracking or anything else. And so that we have two kind of workflow paths that meet both of those needs and don't kind of clobber each other is pretty great.
Mm-hmm. So that'll also make it easier for people that are making experiences that they want to run on a seated kind of Oculus style experience and a Steam VR experience.
Yeah.
Because you can, even if you wanted to, you could make two different cameras, one that's aligned to the ground, one that's aligned to your head height point. So it'll give you a little more fine-grained control. So hopefully that'll be awesome. It'll be.
Yeah. Would that allow you then to you're building a project that is going to ship on multiple, VR experiences, be able to better handle multiple types of devices?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
So it should make all that much, much easier. So we'll look for that in 4.8. We're working on it as we speak. So it's not in main yet for early adopters, but it will be hopefully within a week or two, is my guess, unless something else blows up that needs attention. That never happens in game development, though. It's
No.
entirely
No, everything
That's the
goes
one-
right the first time, every time.
absolutely. Okay, so that's the big thing. The other thing we're kind of working on in the background is working on bug fixing for rendering features that don't work in stereoscopic. So there's a few in there, like light propagation volumes and the distance field shadows that don't work properly between the left and right eyes when we're rendering in stereoscopic for VR.
Right.
So we're kind of trying to hit some of the highly requested features on there. A lot of them are very expensive, so we don't expect them to be widely used, which is why we haven't dedicated time to actually fixing them yet. We've been kind of focused on let's get everything up and running on all the different platforms that have been coming out, and then features that are probably too expensive to use, we'll support them eventually. But now we're actually getting a little more bandwidth. We can start taking a look at fixing those up. And we're actually trying to hire a badass VR rendering programmer. So if you are a badass rendering programmer that likes VR, please send me your resume, and you can help us fix bugs. And then the last thing I'll mention is we've had a lot of questions about multiple GPU support because NVIDIA and AMD both announced their multiple GPU solutions at GDC. So we are actively working on that with both NVIDIA and AMD. We had an implementation for both of them, but we're working to try to make the engine changes a little bit less invasive to the pipeline. We had to kind of pop a bunch of holes in order to make sure we hit all the calls that they needed to set up things, and the calls between the AMD solution and the NVIDIA solution were very different. So there was a lot of holes in our render. So we're working with both those guys to try to narrow down on a kind of more shared common spec, which is better for everybody, right? So we got that. We expect to see it, I don't know, in probably a couple months. It won't make 4.8, that's for sure. But once those guys get us drivers that support it and we get everybody to agree on a spec, that'll be coming. So we're definitely actively looking at it.
Do you remember what kind of performance gains we were getting off that, Nick? It was...
Yeah, we were getting about 27 to 33% advantage on that. There was a few issues that prevented us from using it. We had to sync some of the buffer data between the two GPUs, and that was the sync was actually causing a big delay, which was killing our GPU time. So once we get those fixed and make them asynchronous syncs or just re-render on both eyes, that will be a lot faster. So we're expecting probably 25 to 35 is where I would expect it to fall out.
One of the important factors was that it halved our draw calls that we had to send.
Yes.
Through D3D.
So the CPU time is so much better. By using them, because basically the driver handles the work of sending the draw calls for you. So we don't have to do that manually.
That's pretty massive. It's a big deal.
Yeah, because it's one of the biggest things that kill you in performance is draw calls, right? Like, and it's
quickly becomes a bottleneck.
Yeah, well, you have a game that's nice and performant and looks great, and then you add stereo to it,
Double
and
it.
then it's like, oh,
you're
trying to run it twice.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to run, single or monoscopic with 60 frames a second, much less stereoscopic at 90.
At 90, then all the overhead of VR, that's fun.
Yeah.
So, hey, it's a fun technological challenge, right? It makes you feel like you're back in the days of like the PlayStation, like, hey, let's start making 3D games because we've only made 2D games up until now.
And everyone's like, no, that seems difficult.
Exactly. Hey, we don't shy away from difficulty. We go to VR because it is hard.
That's the only reason, not because it's awesome.
But it's awesome too. It's awesome, man. Awesome, hard.
Yeah.
Cool. So those are kind of the general changes we're working on. The other big thing, due to popular request, like I said, Sam Dieter is the man. He's been making a lot of awesome documentation. You should go check out his Gear VR documentation. He's got some best practices and how to get everything set up on your Android toolchain, on the device itself, all that good information up there. So he just released that doc, and like I said, we're going to be bringing him out here to Seattle so he can play around with the Vive and get a getting started and how to set things up document for that. So he's coming out in a few weeks, so we should expect that to land in, I don't know, a month and a half. By the time everybody gets their Vives in their hot little hands, Sam should have an awesome doc.
Cool.
Up about it. So everybody be very nice to Sam so he writes you more documentation, because that's awesome. The other thing that I will mention too, one of the things that keeps coming up for people making VR projects is that it's really hard, like we said, to run at 90 frames a second. And there's a lot of specialized knowledge that is all compressed into Nick Donaldson's head. So trying to get that knowledge out through whatever means, be it Dremel or Machete or whatever, and onto a page so you guys can read it. But he's starting to work up a doc on optimization and how to use the GPU profiler, which, I don't know, Nick, do you want to talk a little bit about your process on that? What kind of knowledge should they expect to spring forward from your head
Now?
right now?
Sure. So we have the slides from our talk from Oculus Connect. You can also go to the Oculus Connect website and look at our talk, where Nick Whiting and I did a talk that covered basically my approaches to optimizing the Showdown demo.
I'm gonna try to grab this for the chat.
Yeah.
Where'd you say it was? Just to be sure. Is it up
It's
on
on
our site?
unrealengine.com/resources.
Yeah, it's resources. Got it.
Yeah.
And then it's the second VR talk, the learnings from integrating
Yeah.
UE4.
Hard-fought learnings or something like that.
Proceed.
And if you look up YouTube Oculus Connect UE4, you can see the video of the presentation too. So you
Nick's just Google me, you'll find it.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
Google it.
So it's I talk a little bit about. I don't go in super in depth, but I kind of take a first pass on kind of all of the approaches that I take to start figuring out where the bottlenecks are in your project, and then turning things on and off using the show stats to kind of start narrowing down where the performance kind of deltas are, and then kind of opening up the CPU profiler, going through all your function calls, finding out whether or not your frame time on the CPU is going to like static list drawing or particles or things like that, and you can actually kind of see it right down to the function call level, which is really cool. And then from there, trying to kind of hit those things, and you can just start switching them off and be super aggressive about the way that you start approaching those. And then, once you've got CPU under control, you can start, figuring out what is costing you on the GPU by what's the command, Nick, for the GPU profiler? Profile GPU, of course.
Yeah, or Control-Shift, comma will also bring it up.
Yeah, if you're a crazy programmer who does this all day.
Hey, efficiency.
Exactly. 101110.
That's all he does all day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much. You just draw stick figures all day, so.
Well, sure.
He draws stick figures and he makes them perform well, and you just write zeros and ones.
Yeah.
In
that's all-
the closet that is Seattle.
Exactly.
Dark closet.
Yes.
So the GPU profiler is a pretty good way to start getting some pretty high level performance details about where your frame time's going. You can tell whether it's going to you've got HZB occlusion on or something, and you'll see a big chunk for HZB, and it'll pretty much start breaking up all of the major areas that you're spending GPU time on, and you can start hitting those things one at a time and kind of narrowing it all down. So hopefully we can make a really nice doc with that. Maybe I can sit down with Sam once the man turned God is finished with his next set of of VR docs. Then hopefully we can maybe even start hitting that stuff.
I like that man turned God. It's like the apotheosis of Sam Dieter.
Actually, I think Zach Parrish even might be looking at that, because he was asking me the other day where he could find the information. So unless he's doing it for his own selfish ambitions, he might be writing up a doc on that. So
Yeah, and what I was talking to Sam about was basically, even if you can see those stats, like, what does my HTTP occlusion mean?
Right.
We need to carefully document what each entry in the GPU profiler means and how do you fix it, more
Right.
importantly. So
I
if this, then do this.
Yes. Yeah, for me, that means going and talking to the person who wrote the code. So it would be nice to have the people who wrote the code writing some documentation for that stuff too.
Are you talking about him?
No.
Oh.
Like our graphics programmers mainly.
Oh, gotcha.
There's this amazing depth of knowledge that they keep within their brains as well.
So we need more machetes, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. More Dremels.
More Dremels. Oh gosh.
Trade panning,
This is
bringing it back.
It's getting
Yeah.
dark. Getting dark, y'all.
Cool. So that's it for the update. So should we just move on to some Q&A?
Yeah. We'll hop into it. I know you've got all the info right there in front of you. So if you just want
I do. I've got a list of questions, so I will just go through and start reading them off and answering them. And
Cool. Yeah, and anybody that's in the chat, we've got about 20 minutes or so left. There's significant number of questions we've got here to work through, but we may be able to get to more. So if you want to drop anything into the chat, we've already got a few. We'll take a couple more.
Sweet. All right. So the first one was, what are the plans for dedicated optimized VR rendering path, other performance-related improvements? So right now, one of the biggest things that's killing our time is because we don't allow any buffering and parallelism between the CPU and the GPU. That's causing your GPU basically to sit idle for about 40% of the frame, which is less than ideal. It kills us. There's you've got this big wealth of meaty GPU and you can't touch it. Right before GDC, Oculus was giving some talks about techniques like late latching, which is huge and will let us basically get back that 40% chunk of time, or at least a good bit of that 40% chunk. So
that's a lot.
How does that work in layman's terms, Nick?
So basically what they're doing is they're letting you sample the position of the HMD much later in the pipe. So when you're rotating around, right, we need to know what the position of your head was so that we can render the view from the position that your head is in the world. So right now we get that right before we start kicking off all the draw calls.
Yep.
On the render thread. So we say basically, okay, here's the last position. All right, now go draw a bunch of stuff from this position. What the late latching kind of lets you do is push that out later into the frame so that we can let the CPU and the GPU start working in parallel rather than being in lockstep. And we can sample the position from the HMD right when the GPU is ready to start rendering stuff.
Cool.
So that's probably a very terrible explanation on the spot, but actually the Oculus website by Ottman Binstock that explains it all with nice, pretty diagrams.
Oh.
So if you're interested in how that works, you should go read that. So basically, we're working with those guys to try to get that back, because if we can get back that 40% GPU time, it doesn't matter how much optimization we do to our rendered pipe, we're never going to get 30 to 40% of it back. So CPU parallelism is kind of the big thing that we're approaching right now. In addition to just other low-hanging fruit that we do, there's been some recent shader improvements to decrease the cost of things like the clear coat shader if you're not using it, which saves a half a millisecond, which is actually quite a bit of time. So things like that. So we kind of have a lot of little things in the pipe, and then some big things like getting back the parallelism between CPU and GPU.
Yeah, that's massive.
Yep.
That would make my life a lot easier. There's only so much blood you can squeeze from the stone sometimes.
We've actually had it for a year or so, and then we're just not letting you have it just because we like to see the suffering.
Oh.
Yeah.
Feel suffering.
Yeah.
Nick Donaldson tears. All right, so that's kind of the high level on that.
Is that Nick Whiting is powered on the tears of Nick Donaldson?
Yeah.
Is that how this works?
We call him Evil Nick, and I'm good Nick.
I got it.
Yeah.
No, you're evil because you got facial hair.
Oh.
Oh yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's not from the States.
No.
No. Any Commonwealth country, as I heard, because British accents are always the villains in movies, so I think that extends to
Gosh.
Anyway, back to VR. So native integration of Oculus 3D Audio SDK, e.g., and not as an Fmod plugin. So good news on that front. We actually used that at GDC for both the Showdown demo. We redid the audio for the Oculus Audio 3D Audio plugin, and we used it in the Weta demo. So we recently hired, actually about 2 or 3 months ago, an awesome audio programmer named Aaron. And one of his first tasks was actually to wing that into our current audio system. So we have a plugin, you just enable it like any other plugin, and you've got awesome 3D spatialized audio. So that'll be hitting in 4.8 natively. You can already grab it from the main line if you're an early adopter. It's under the plugins directory, but you need to pull some audio code as well. It's not a one change list integration. So if you want to use it, I would advise waiting to 4.8, but it's in there and ready to go.
And it sounds really, really good too.
It does. It's if you aren't familiar, it's called HRTF. Basically, what they're doing, and it simulates the location of a sound. It really lets you kind of pinpoint where a sound's coming from. Right now, you get a kind of general direction, but with the Oculus Audio plugin, you can kind of say the sound is coming from that way in particular.
It was kind of amazing when we were developing the demo with Weta, and you had the giant dragon coming around you, and he was talking. We first integrated the audio. And as he's talking and coming by you, we kind of realized we're listening, and we're like, his voice is coming from a point inside of his head. Like it was amazing that you could narrow it down to such a specific point. And we started thinking about it more, and we're like, do we need to separate out the high frequency noises to the tip of his tongue, and then the other stuff from the bellows of his throat, and then from his chest, you know?
So you can really get a nice, like, dynamic range of
If you're
sound and
really,
location.
yeah, if you're really paying attention to it, you can kind of tell exactly where that sound's coming from. It's crazy.
And it's amazing the kind of preconceived notions we have about a talking, like 200-foot dragon.
Right. You just know, you know
Like,
what he
yeah,
should
that-
sound
that-
like, and
that's
it doesn't
right, yeah,
sound like
that's
that.
true.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's pretty cool.
Cool. So, yeah, that's good news on that front. So, what improvements are being worked on for Gear VR? So, fortunately, like I said, I've got JJ Hazing
Hello.
right here, who's doing all our support. So, he can talk about what's going on there.
Right. So as Nick mentioned earlier in the stream, we've got 050. The 050 Oculus Mobile SDK is in mainline. It's been checked in. For people who are still working on 4.7 for the game jam, one of the forum members, Gnome Tech, Dave, in the Gear VR game jam thread, he's gone ahead and moved that back into 4.7 in a GitHub branch of his own. So that's handy if you are familiar with GitHub and want to work out of 4.7 with 050. He's already kind of done the legwork for that. He's also brought back a head model integration and for Gear VR MSAA, and I went ahead and mainline the OVR global menu has been fixed. That's where when you hold down the back button for 0.75 seconds, it should bring up the Oculus global menu. That works in mainline, and Gnome Tech in the forums brought that back to his GitHub branch as well for 4.7. And one other thing that we're looking into is gesture support, so like forward, back, up, down. No promises there, but we're looking into that. And then the last one is the little Samsung gamepad support. I have a patch that I'll post to the forums that fixes that specifically. The problem with that is that it breaks like PS3 gamepad support on the Android, because all the different gamepads on Android kind of map the right stick differently, which is kind of crazy, and the triggers. So there's no real standard for that on Android. But if you need it for the Samsung one, I'll put a patch up in the forums. And in the meantime, we're looking into an actual fix so that we can detect which gamepad you have hooked up and use correct mapping. So,
Cool.
and I think that's most of it for now. So yeah, check out the game jam thread on the forums if you need kind of the very latest back in 4.7. So.
And if you're working on Gear VR, check your game thread, because timing is very important on mobile.
If there's a thread, check it.
Cool, so that covers the next two. All right, let's see. Official Leap Motion plugin availability for Mac. So this is something that we just barely missed the cutoff for 4.7 when we got the initial Leap plugin support for. So basically right now we just have to enable it and run it through our QA testing. So we will hopefully get that out for 4.8. We'll have official support for it. All right, scrolling down. All right. Ooh, optimization questions.
Uh-oh.
So, this is a programming optimization question. So
Good.
nice. Yeah, you just don't want to talk. All right. Have you considered optimizing the engine for VR by rendering only parts or only once parts of the scene that are far away and have no stereo disparity? I believe that in big open worlds like the kite demo, this technique could provide massive savings. So we have actually talked to, we haven't done it ourselves, but we've talked to licensees who have started trying to do this. They got a bit of savings, but it wasn't as big as they had hoped for it. So actually we just had a couple email threads with them, so they're going to keep trying that. So it's something we're keeping our eye on, but it's not something that we think is like a huge automatic win because it's a little kludgy to set up in the engine. You kind of, basically what we do is fake the old scene depth priority group stuff, and then just take everything after a certain distance and then make it into one buffer, but you still have to do some copying that slows things down a little bit. So it is something we're looking at, and we're working with a couple people that are trying it, but I don't think it's a huge instant win, unfortunately.
So the hope is that we save on pixel fill cost and then just copy that data over to the other frame?
Yeah, basically the idea is like if you imagine you're in a car or something like that, and then you have stuff outside the car, or if you're in a space shooter or something like that, you can render everything that's outside that doesn't actually have much disparity between your left and right eyes because it's so far away once, and then just copy that buffer and use that as the background between both of the eyes, so that you don't have to render those things twice. So But you still, the unfortunate part is you still have to kind of render the rest of the scene at a high frame rate. So you
Right.
save on it a little bit, but a lot of the detail is usually in the near field, so that makes things a little bit complicated.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we've talked about doing, and this is still kind of an R&D idea, I don't think anybody's actually tried implementing it, is doing alternate frame rendering. So if you had a car and stuff outside, render both of them at 45 hertz every other frame. So you'd render the cockpit one frame, and then you'd render the outside the next frame, and then you go back to rendering the cockpit. So you'd only have to render half the scene each frame, and then do reprojection to line them up every other frame. So when the cockpit's not being rendered or the car's not being rendered, you use reprojection similar to what we do with the time warp in order to get that to look correctly. So it's something we're thinking about, but we're trying to, like I said, the biggest savings we see on the horizon is just getting back our parallelism,
Right.
which will be huge for us. Next question. Is there currently a way to enable asymmetric gameplay using only one PC? For instance, having one player in FPS mode inside the VR using a controller while having a second one on doing the action on a monitor using a mouse and keyboard. So not really. For most people that want to have that kind of asymmetric gameplay, we've had people set up a listen server for the VR client and then have a remote network client on an iPad or a laptop or another computer that can interact with the world just basically via our standard multiplayer networking code. So you can do it in blueprints, you can do it in native code. But that works a lot better because the problem is if you're running two different clients or, kind of two projections of one client, you're really going to run the risk of missing frame rate because it takes CPU bandwidth to do all that stuff, and you have to render two views, which eats up more of your GPU. So it would make it incredibly hard to make a good experience, especially at 90 frames a second for it. So we recommend doing the client server.
Yeah, definitely. It's like I've done this before with an iPad to Oculus, implementation in the past, and you kind of have to treat them as two different experiences. That are just talking to each other, right? That are passing important information back and forth that they need to know about each other. And that seems to work better than trying to loop it all into one big hunk of a project or, a product. And yeah, you have the trade-offs Nick was talking about.
Yeah, so that's what we recommend. We've actually had a few people do some cool stuff with that. There's a lot of people that do kind of, remote control of the world or, tweaking settings and stuff while somebody else is playing the game. There's a lot of cool interaction ideas. You play cat and mouse with somebody in VR, especially if you had like a room scale VR like the Vive. It would be, I can imagine there's some cool things you could do playing kind of like Overlord and throwing enemies and stuff at somebody that's running around a rail room. So if somebody does it,
that's awesome because they can't see you, so they don't really know where you are. Yeah, all of the things that make VR awkward for everybody else watching you make the game fun for them, and you win.
Exactly. Cool. So that's what we recommend on that one. So next question. Is there anything that's a particular limitation in UE4 in regards to VR? Are there general limitations quite the same within Unreal Engine 4? I'd like to understand where I can cheat and where I can't. So Nick can probably speak a little more to the specific limitations, but there's nothing per se that's limited in UE4 for VR. Like I said, there's a few rendering features that we just need to fix up, like light propagation volumes and the distance field shadow stuff, but those will be fixed. The biggest limitation is just what you can do performantly and maintain a high frame rate, which Nick, you can kind of list some of the common offenders that you run into.
Yeah, so on VR, typically we double our draw calls because we're sending the same scene to both eyes to be rendered from different perspectives. So that's a big kind of limitation. You basically want half the amount of draw calls than you typically would want in a scene like that. But you don't actually double on the GPU. You don't actually double your pixel fill since you're only filling half the screen with one view and half the screen with the other. So there are some things that kind of literally double and some things that don't. The biggest problem at the moment is, like Nick was saying, about the synchronicity of the CPU and GPU, where we actually just lose a massive amount of performance due to the way the rendering pipeline works. So hopefully when we get that back, then, so for example, Showdown, I'll run in single view at 1080p, and it'll run at like 300, 400 frames per second or something crazy on a high-end video card like that. And then you go to stereo view and you tank down to 100 and something. And it doesn't just half, or it doesn't, it does some pretty crazy things. So the savings that Nick is looking to make with the getting the CPU and GPU to stop, kind of blocking each other. That's going to be one of the biggest hurdles that we get to cover, and hopefully it's not the performance delta between a regular game and VR game aren't quite so drastic. Other considerations when making art in there are some of the ones I cover in my talk are about basically 2D things just look 2D in VR. So when you have like a sprite particle having a little smoke or a little explosion or something like that, it just looks like a sprite particle with smoke. It looks like wallpaper or something like that. So it's
Everyone hates wallpaper.
yes, it's so bad.
Worst.
Hey, at least this is real wood, right?
Yeah.
So building things out of geometry is actually a lot more important in VR. For anything above, like small scale things are totally fine to have normal maps and flat looking things like that. Like the texture on this keyboard, which you can't see here, has little dimples on it, and that kind of stuff's totally fine with normal maps and textures. But when it comes to like anything bigger than about a kind of a centimeter across, that's right, I said centimeter.
What's that?
Exactly. About a third of an inch.
A hundredth of a furlong.
Exactly.
No.
So anything bigger than a small detail, you probably want to be building out of geometry. So things to fake, yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it. We
And normal maps work on things in the distance too.
Yeah.
Where you can actually see that there's no geometry there. So you can use them if you had a brick wall in the distance just to add some shape to it and tease the lighting a bit.
I mean, in brick walls in general, it's unless you're getting really close to that brick wall, it's kind of okay.
There's actually a really good talk that Alex from Valve gave at GDC. That actually goes over some of the, where you can use normal maps, where you can't use normal maps, where specular starts to bite you in VR a little bit.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend that. That's on, if you just Google Alex, I think Vlachos, Vlachos, is his
That's a
name.
fantastic read.
Yeah, it's really good. I highly recommend that talk for anybody that's interested, because he covers both the technical side and the art side quite a bit.
We're actually getting kind of close on time, so we'll probably only be able to get a couple more in, unless you guys are good to go past 3 today. Do you have anything that's kind of pressing?
Not super pressing.
Nick?
I could do another 5-10 minutes if
Shelley?
you want to.
All right, we're all good. Cool.
All right, cool.
What's next?
Cool. Let's see here. People are wanting to play back footage and audio within UE4 that is currently capable, but would there be any push for 3D stereoscopic VR support? So playing back of 3D stereoscopic stuff, actually, since most of the 3D stereoscopic movies are actually encoded as MPEGs or H.264s or something, you can put them on a sphere and just use a material shader basically to play them back, or use it as a post-process effect and do your own sampling for it. One of the things we are looking at is adding 3D or 360-degree capture support on the desktop. So if you had something that you wanted a VR experience on the PC, like Showdown or something, that you wanted to capture as a video, since there's no kind of interaction with it, it's just kind of a cinematic experience, or the Thief in the Shadows demo, we are adding support for rendering that out as a 360-degree movie, and then you could put it on something like a Gear VR and run it, because you're just playing back a movie at that point, as opposed to having to actually render stuff, 3D geometry and all that. So that's one of the things that's on our radar for the next couple months, is to look into start kind of polishing that sort of thing up, so people can take their super high fidelity experiences and bake them down in movies.
Cool.
Next question. Are there any plans to make profiling in VR easier, i.e. profile data on the desktop as opposed to on device? So the biggest thing on our radar right now is, like I said, Sam explaining how to profile, because that's kind of the biggest hurdle for a lot of people, is very few people are as familiar with GPU view as Evil Nick. So getting that document out there, and basically, when you see this number is too high, here's how you can attempt to fix it. That's kind of the first step in that.
Right.
Doing profile data on the desktop as opposed to the device, there's some changes coming that will let us more easily put data on the mirrored window that's on your desktop, on your 2D monitor. So we're thinking about doing some kind of specialized debugging or stats viewing on that once we
really?
get. Yes.
Tell me more.
I can't tell anybody any more yet.
Okay. Moving along.
Yes, moving along. So any plans for a Liquid VR implementation, expected performance? Okay, so we kind of covered that a little bit earlier, but for those who aren't familiar, Liquid VR is the, I guess you call it a brand name, of AMD's multi-GPU support. So yes, we're working with AMD on an implementation of it. Expected performance, I can only judge based off of the numbers we got on the NVIDIA multi-GPU performance. Like I said, it was kind of 25 to 35% in our first test, but that's not representative of final numbers. We still got some optimization and sync points we can improve. So that's our kind of first blush implementation of it. I don't think it's going to magically give you, 100% more performance. It's probably going to be, 30s. It would be my guess for the expected performance out of that. Let's see, next one. Normals don't work if we near the object. What's the best performance or best way to avoid flat surfaces in VR? Kind of already talked about that, but did you have anything else?
It's kind of, there's no single victory in that regard. It's kind of.
You did do that one thing with the bullet hole shader in Showdown. I mean, it's not normals necessarily, but if you have a case where you need some depth.
Things that shader tricks that work per eye, like bump offset, work remarkably well in VR. So that's something that's worth playing with if you want to get a little bit more depth in a surface. You could try kind of splitting your surface up into a couple of different bump offset layers and then masking between them. Some kind of tricky thing like that. That's kind of performance heavy, so it's not necessarily a good idea all the time. Stuff that's near you, just build it out of geometry and then see if you can LOD it down in the mesh LODs, things like that. I mean, there's no single victory to making that work really, really well, but kind of just a series of trade-offs between kind of how much you want to pay for geometry. If you are triangle bound, if modern GPUs can chew through verts like it ain't no thing. So sometimes throwing polys at it is the right way to go. So
yeah, making it higher poly and keeping the work off of the shader.
Yeah,
keeping the work in the actual geometry.
Yeah, I mean trying both is
it's interesting. There was kind of like that switch, I guess about a year ago, maybe a little longer, but with a lot of techs that I've worked with, where you look at it on devices and it's like, wow, actually a higher poly mesh works way better, than something that we normally want to calculate in the shader.
Yeah. So give it a shot. You got to try one thing against the other and just try.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about VR. Like I said, it's hard. Nobody knows the answers to this. So I think if you come up with a clever solution, you will be a hero to many, many people. So don't be afraid. Let's see here. Fake lighting. Any tips for achieving nice results through material trickery alone? I think this one is squarely in your court.
Yeah, that's kind of a big area of. I mean, it depends what kind of things you're trying to achieve. In the Showdown, Nick, did you mention that we were maybe going to be able to release Showdown at some point?
I hadn't mentioned it because I didn't have a date and I didn't want to be a tease.
Well, there you go. No, you can't touch this. Yes, we're still hoping to release it. We don't know when, but Showdown has some examples of at least dynamic or fake blob shadows for the character. I went over that on my Oculus Connect talk a little bit as well. Fake lighting. I actually did as well in that a little experiment with, I made a sphere with inverted normals. It's a trick we used actually in Gears 3. A sphere with inverted normals, and then in the material you turn off depth testing. And then you can basically make your own deferred lighting, where you use all of the G-buffer, you use the scene texture node, and then you get the depth, pixel depth, and then you can kind of calculate the depth of the pixels behind the translucency.
All right.
And then you can get like the center of the sphere, and that's kind of your light source. And then you can kind of get the distance, take measurements from the distance from there, and then calculate your fall off, and then use the normals, and then do a dot product between that particular area. And then, you can basically make your own deferred lighting. It's pretty cool. Turned out it was actually cheaper to just use the real one. I thought I was being this tricky mofo, but turns out, it just wasn't worth it in the end. There were some situations where it was cheaper and some where it wasn't, but there were more where it was just cheaper to use the real one with shadows turned off. So, try some of those tricks. If you need more details, ask questions somewhere.
Yeah.
Say, I heard Nick talking about this on the phone.
Yeah, such math speak.
Yeah.
So wow.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Cool.
Basically, static lighting. Any pro tips or general considerations using light masks, especially for mobile?
Mobile, yes. So when I was working with Sam on some of the Gear VR stuff that we were doing, there's those really simple options in the materials, which is mobile fully rough, and then directional light maps. You turn those off, and performance just goes through the roof. You basically lose the ability to get directionality from normal maps in the light maps. So basically, your normal maps no longer work properly for the light maps. It still works for things like reflections and stuff like that, but
No, but you can't. That's kind of an all or nothing thing, though, right? You can't choose.
you do it per
specific-
material.
Okay. Oh,
So
okay. Yeah.
So if you've got some things that just don't need it, or you
Yeah.
can just put that information into the diffuse, just kind of bake it in there,
Yeah.
especially for mobile, it's a big performance win.
That's great.
Without having to turn off lighting altogether. So that's probably the best place to start if you haven't tried that.
Cool.
Yep.
Next question is dynamic lighting. Do we have this available on Gear VR? Is it feasible to combine small instances of dynamic lighting alongside static and/or fake? And we'll go back to JJ.
Nick, Evil Nick has a better idea of that. But yes, you can do dynamic lighting. You can't do dynamic shadows, but you can do dynamic lighting. I'd recommend minimizing it as much as possible because hitting 60 on your VR is just crazy hard. As much static lighting as possible.
Right.
Going back to some of the lighting hacks you mentioned earlier, I actually put out a sample level. I think Nick uploaded it.
Yeah, it was linked on the forums.
Yeah, and that's if you want to go really crazy, where you just want the quickest shaders possible. You can just manually do the dot products yourself, and clamp it and add in some ambient. That's kind of crazy though, and you have to hard code a directional light and stuff like that. But if you really want to do it, you get pretty good performance.
You can actually use, JJ, you can use material parameter collections to set like a per level or a non-hard-coded global light vector.
Right.
You can set light color, light direction, etc. And that works really well.
So if you want to go down that route, there's a lot of things you can try and a lot of things you can kind of hand roll yourself. But doing the fully rough is a great start to get things up.
We found in our little test level that on Gear VR, fully rough with all the materials got us well over the 60. Shooting balls around in the first-person view.
And when you're in a material editor, you can actually get like cycle count and stuff like that for mobile shaders. So that can help when you're trying to determine whether you made things faster or slower without actually running it. So.
Cool.
Do you want to handle the next one too? Any particular performance recommendations to maintain 60 frames a second? For example, draw calls, number of triangles, verts.
Is that specific to Gear VR?
Yeah.
Draw calls anywhere between 50 and 100 per eye. Lower better. 50 to 75 is what I'd recommend. Triangle count. It's a little dependent on your material still because the GPU is so weak, but generally 75,000 per eye is where you should start considering to be your maximum. So pretty low.
So start off with cubes and go up from there.
Yeah. You can probably get up to 100,000.
Isn't that what we do with everything? Cubes first.
You're getting 60. So.
Cool. All right. Going back to the next question. Will we see expanded blueprint objects giving easy access to currently unavailable data, for example, the player's real-world height, gender, IPD, and stuff from the Oxconfig utilities? So yes, we've been talking to Oculus. They're going to make a Oculus-specific function library, so things that Oculus has in their profile data that other platforms might not have.
Cool.
They'll make accessors for that sort of stuff. So if you want to mess around with that in your blueprints, you should be able to do that coming up. So that was easy. And then the last question. Have the suggestions from, Valve's Alex make a team presentation been incorporated into UE4, or will they in the future? So there was a couple things in there that we do. Some of the specular stuff we have a kind of different approach to.
Right.
So we have slightly different solutions for the same problems that he was kind of bringing up. The other things he did, he has the VR running start, which is something that we're doing in our implementation for that. What else did he have? Oh, they do some cool stuff with essential mesh. So basically, for an optimization, we render side by side on a square screen, and then through the distortion, it kind of contracts it, and it becomes like two semicircular images. So basically, there's a lot of wasted pixels that you can't actually see on the device. So what SteamVR does, and is super clever, is they provide you a mesh so you can mask out pixels that aren't actually going to be rendered, so you don't have to waste fill rate time on that. So in their implementation in Source 2, I think Alex said it was 14% bump in their fill rate because they just got to reject pixels that they'll never see, so they didn't have to spend GPU time on them. That's something we did not quite get in for GDC, but it's something that we're going to add very soon. And we've been pressing other hardware vendors to maybe add the stencil mesh support, or at least give us that data so we can use the same sort of technique to get a little boost out of our fill rate.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so every little bit counts. So cool.
Cool.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's all
Yeah.
we
So
got for.
yeah, with that, we're a little closer on time. Thanks for staying a little bit later.
Yeah, it's good.
Any closing thoughts, Nick? About VR, fun things, dogs, cats?
Dogs, cats. We have lots of cats at the Epic Seattle office. We're very cat. Actually, the conference room next to this one is called the Cat Fancy Reading Room, and they're actually a year subscription, including the very coveted last issue of Cat Fancy. Catster.
And on that note,
so viewers, he's not kidding. That's
He really
actually
isn't.
true.
Yeah.
But as far as VR goes, yeah, we're keeping up. Like I said, basically the resource allocation thus far has been making sure that everybody has a very consistent experience across all the devices that are coming out. So we've got, the Oculus, the Gear VR, the Steam VR / Vive, and the new Morpheus stuff all integrated. We're keeping those all up to spec, and then as we get time in our pipe, we're adding those other new features like fixing LPV, light propagation volumes, and distance field shadows, stuff like that. So that's our goals for right now. Guys, keep giving us feedback. There's been no shortage of it, so we're going to try to make things easier for you. If there's anything that you want Sam Dieter, I'm going to throw him out there under the bus to document for you. You should also let us know about that because he's awesome, and we're happy to fill his head with knowledge so he can in turn fill your heads with knowledge.
Cool. Is your phone
That's
ringing?
all I
It
got.
is. Yeah, I gotta go.
All right. Yeah.
My wife's calling.
Sounds good. All right. Yeah. And if there's any questions we didn't get that you guys had, feel free to drop them into the forum thread, and we'll be kind of trolling around there, seeing what we can answer and figure out for y'all. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, Nick, JJ. Thanks for dialing in. Really appreciate it. Spending time with everybody. This has been great. I've learned a lot. So next week we've got, just real quick before we go, audio stream with Zach Bellica from, he's the Fortnite audio director. So if you're interested in audio in UE4, we had to kick it from April 7th to the 21st because he got sick. So if you are interested, please come to that, ask him your questions. I'll be there too. And then next week is the 4.8 preview with Ray and Mike Fricker. So there's going to be a lot of new information. We probably won't touch much on VR, but outside of that, if you want to see what's coming, that's going to be one you don't want to miss. So awesome. Well, thanks a lot, everyone, and thank you, Shelly. And we will see you next week.